everyone. My name is Jamie Smith. I am a nurse practitioner with Premier Geriatric Solutions here in Southwestern Virginia. I am the Chief Educator and Compliance Officer, and today I will be the host on Nurse Deck, and we have Ryann Mason here. Hi, Ryann.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes, can you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Ryann. Like you said, I'm a 29-year-old registered nurse who also happens to be practicing with a disability that has me using a wheelchair. I was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome when I was around 16 years old. It's a collagen disorder that affects every bit of my body and causes a plethora of super fun symptoms. But one of the staples being that all of my joints dislocate very easily, especially when I walk. And so I've been using a wheelchair for the past 3 years. And as far as my nursing history, I have, I did the math the other day, 12 years of emergency medicine experience, 6 of those as a registered nurse.
Wow.
And then 2 years case management and going on 7 months postpartum. Yeah.
Wow, you've been a nurse for a while.
Yeah.
So tell us, Ryann, tell our viewers today on Nurse Deck, how did you get started as a nurse?
Sure. So I mentioned that I was born with a disability. And so that disability has affected my life many different times, but specifically as a kid growing up, before I was even diagnosed, I was in and out of the hospital constantly, specifically the ER, for falls, head injuries from those falls, dislocations, you name it. I was in and out of there a lot. And I remember being about 15, 16 years old and being in the ER again. And my mom made a joke and she's like, Ryann, if you're going to be in and out of here so much, you might as well get paid to push the stretcher. Now, this was totally a joke because at the time I wanted to be a professional ballerina or on Broadway. That was my goal. I was a dancer, had no interest in health or science. And my family was also made up of artists, musicians, not medical people. And so she made this joke and I said, all right, you're on. So I signed up for a class to train to be an emergency medical technician, EMT, maybe a few months later. I took the class thinking that it would be like a one-time thing just to tackle something that scared me and had caused a lot of trauma in my life. I said, let me do this. Ended up falling in love and I was an EMT, ended up working all through high school and all through college. When I went away to college the first time, I majored in human sexuality. I at that time had been diagnosed and realized, okay, I can't dance professionally. Like that's never going to happen for me. So I stayed with what I had learned I loved. I stayed with medicine, but I'd been fascinated in sexuality and wanted to be a sexual educator. And so that's what I went to school with the first time. Ended up teaching sex ed for about 6 months in middle schools. And that there's only so many times that you can tell a middle school boy how to put a condom on a cucumber before you're like, you know what? I think I need a change. No. And the whole time I missed my roots. I missed patient care. And so I came back to my hometown, Southwestern Virginia, and went back to school and got my registered nursing license. And I've been a nurse ever since.
Good for you. Seems like you love being a nurse.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah. Tell us, what's something you wish you had known as a new nurse?
Oh, that's a good one. Probably that nobody actually is trying to eat me alive and no one actually wants me to fail. It just can feel like that. And back then, now, but I feel like there was a lot of, nurse bullying within ranks and things. I started out as a brand new nurse with little to no experience in the ER of all places. So it was very high stress and a lot. But yeah, definitely that it gets better and it gets easier. And that every single person in that emergency room or on that floor has been in my shoes, in your shoes as a new nurse, and knows what it's like and remembers how hard it was and wants you to succeed and is there to help no matter what. You don't have to go through this alone.
That's a powerful statement. You know, being a brand new nurse, especially in the ED, I can't imagine. I worked PCU, transitioned from there, but ICU, completely intimidating. So powerful statement that, you know, other nurses have been there as well, and they're there to help. And you know, we have everyone to work with us. So
Absolutely.
Ryann, will you share with us, tell us about your journey as a disability advocate?
Absolutely. So though I was diagnosed when I was 16 with my disability, because at the time I was diagnosed, my only real symptom that was affecting my day-to-day life was I had one shoulder that would sublux or partially dislocate every time I raised it above shoulder height. It happened to be my right arm and my dominant arm, so it was annoying at best, but it had been that way my whole life. It's all I ever knew. So I made do. And so when they diagnosed me with this disorder I couldn't even pronounce, and told me, okay, you know, it's very possible you will be in a wheelchair by the time you're 20. Like any other, you know, bullheaded 16-year-old, I just kind of was like, okay, it's not affecting me now, so that's fine. But sorry, can you repeat that question? My brain just went, hello.
No, it's okay. I mean, these are pretty, I mean, if you get emotional, it's okay. At one point, I thought you were going to. You are a strong person. I know this is like we've stopped, but just hearing you talk, you just have got a good personality. Like, no wonder you got 12,000 followers on LinkedIn. I mean, seriously.
Thank you.
I mean, oh gosh. Okay. So I'm going to start back from the question, but before we start it back, the question was, Ryann, will you share with us, our viewers, tell us about your journey as a disability advocate?
That's where I was going with that.
Okay, yes. Yeah. So here on the count of three, we'll start back there. Ryann, will you share with us today, tell us about your journey as a disability advocate?
Absolutely. So, like I said, when I was diagnosed when I was 16, and like any other bullheaded 16-year-old that's told, you know, you have this disability I can't even pronounce, and you'll, you know, end up in a wheelchair by the time you're 20, I kind of just laughed it off. I was like, okay, whatever. I remember specifically, I had like an elevator story. You know, that those little moments where somebody asks you, you know, what's going on, why you have bilateral knee braces, ankle braces, and wrist braces at 17 years old every day. Why do you look like you are going to roller derby just trying to go to gym class?
Yeah.
And so I would be like, oh yeah, I was born with this genetic joint disorder. It's a whole thing. They say I'll be in a wheelchair by the time I'm 20, but hey, look at me, I'm fine right now. And that was kind of that was it. I had this thing that I could, yes, it was a disability technically, but I didn't even think of myself as disabled. I was just kind of like, that's just how I'm made and whatever. About the time that my mobility started being severely affected, so around 2015, 2016, I started having to use a cane regularly. I was working full-time in the ER still at the time. Had fallen in love with trauma nursing, absolutely loved it. It was all I ever wanted to do. And so I was training to become a flight nurse, and that was my goal. And so all of a sudden, in the midst of all of this, my left hip, which is normally it can dislocate on command, like as a party trick, I've been doing it since I was a kid, is starting to slip when I take a step unexpectedly. And so I'm forced to leave the ER to kind of focus more on, okay, well, I need to be able to walk in order to do this job. Went from using a cane to using forearm crutches to a wheelchair in a very short period of time, maybe totally over the course of a year. And at that time, having to leave the ER and taking a job away from the bedside and trying to learn this whole new life as a woman in a wheelchair, I immediately turned to social media, and I made this Instagram as a diary, a place for me to tell my story. And because I had this disability my whole life, but for most of it, it had been invisible. And so there were tons of people very close to me that had no idea I was even disabled. And so I wanted to kind of tell my story and what it was like, mainly just for my friends and family to, okay, when they see me walking around with a cane, they can know, like, this is what's happened and here's my whole story. Plus, it was good therapy for me on those good days and bad days. And because I was in my head just sharing with friends and family, it was very candid and very right there in the moment of, the first time that I couldn't find a spot close enough and realized that I needed to obtain a handicap placard. That was a lot. Yeah. And so I'm doing all of this. I'm going through all of this pretty much alone, because at this point in my life, when I was diagnosed with EDS, I was 16, and it was before social media was really a huge thing. So it wasn't like I could just log on and connect with a bunch of different people with my disorder. I felt very alone and isolated, and most physicians couldn't even tell me what my life was going to look like, because it was so rare and so few people specialize in it, that when I would go in, they couldn't tell me if it would affect my lifespan. They couldn't tell me if I could have kids. It was so much going through all of this by myself. And so when I turned to my Instagram and I started sharing my story, all of a sudden I'm getting these messages from these newly diagnosed people who are like, oh my gosh, I found your page, and just hearing how you managed to go through this and how your journey, went, it gave me the inspiration that I needed to keep going and to, figure out that there is more to my life than just being stuck in a chair or stuck on a couch. And so from then I just kind of took off. I kept going with it. I said, all right, well, I'm just going to keep sharing my story. And it's sometimes not pretty and sometimes very in your face, but we're going to do it. And this ended up chronicalizing. Now I have this page that I can watch myself, slowly lose my mobility, but at the time completely regain my confidence and learn who I am as a person. And so I never expected to be a disability advocate. I didn't even think of myself as disabled until a few years ago. And suddenly I was in the middle of it before I knew any better. And I absolutely love it. It's what I love to do every single day. And it's made me a better nurse and a better person. And yeah, that's me.
Wow. Wow. What a story, Ryann. Thank you for sharing that. And look at you. You said your dream was to work in the ER, be a flight nurse, and then you ended up having, you say you work as labor and delivery now, is that right?
Postpartum, mother baby.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. And you went to social media, and look at what inspiration you've been to other people. How amazing is that?
Thank you.
I have to pause for just a second. You made me tear. Hold on.
So you're making me tear up.
Wow. I'm trying to be all professional here, but wow. What a story, Miss Ryann. Wow. Thank you for that. All right, Nurse Tech, give me 3 seconds to put myself back together. Thank you for sharing your story. Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Ryann, how can we go about creating a safer healthcare system and environment for nurses?
Oh, that is a good one. Well, number one, my answer will always be turn and ask your nurses. They are the people who are in and out of the thick of it, day in and day out. They spend more time on those hospital floors than almost anyone else, and they know well. And the biggest thing I think we run into now and most in every hospital I have worked in my entire career is retention and focusing on the nurses that we have and the nurses that are putting in the work on the floors day in, day out, and making sure that we do have the safe staffing ratios that we need as much as possible, that we do have the support that's needed on the floor in order to properly educate new nurses coming on, especially now in the midst of the biggest health crisis we've seen in all of our lives. Support is, I think, the biggest thing. I've never seen so many nurses come together like I have this past 2 years, and it's been amazing. Incredibly frustrating, but really amazing to see it and to remember why we all entered this field in the first place, for sure. But yeah, definitely turning in and talking to your nurses and working for your nurses.
Being supportive goes a long way. Just letting people know you're there for them. Say, hey, I was a new nurse. I know it's intimidating. I know you feel vulnerable. Don't worry about asking questions. No question is silly. Just ask. Being that support system alone will help with retention, I believe.
Absolutely.
So, yes. How do you think nurses can benefit, Ryan, from the NurseDex community for nurses?
Oh, I think one of the biggest things that has helped me is, turning to on my social media. I've met so many nurses from different walks of life because, I grew up in Southwestern Virginia, and that's where I've practiced my whole life, different hospitals in different areas down here, but it's still Southwestern Virginia. And so meeting other nurses from other walks of life, from other specialties that I don't even have in my surrounding hospitals, has been instrumental. And so having a community like NurseDeck to turn and learn about other nurses, hear stories from nurses, by nurses, for nurses is incredibly helpful, because how often are we getting educated by someone who hasn't worked on the floor in 50 years, or if ever, and doesn't know what it's like? And so to have a place where you can turn and speak to people who have been through it, who know how you're feeling, is incredibly helpful and supportive. And I think something that a lot of us definitely needed early on in our nursing careers.
I agree. It's like they get it. They understand.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Do you think, Ryan, that there is bias in nursing?
I definitely think so. And I don't think I realized it as much until I began nursing from a wheelchair. I definitely didn't. I wasn't educated at all on the disability community. And what I speak to when I talk to healthcare workers in groups time and time again, and so many of us had the same experience in school where, our lesson about disability was like, okay, we have a week to hit the high points of here are the certain disabilities that you will see that affect mobility, and this is what to look for. Pressure sores. Okay, moving on. That was it. And so many people just don't feel comfortable around people utilizing mobility aids full time, especially as a result of something that's not aging process. We're just not trained on how to care for these patients. And when we are, it's very outdated. It's mainly focused on the geriatric community. And so there's this entire population of people who, though incredibly reliant on healthcare as a whole, feels very slighted by them. And I think in nursing, we have a tendency to, provide better care to the things that we're more comfortable with. And that's just human nature. And so I do think a bit of bias exists in that manner, especially. And it wasn't until I became a nurse from this position that I earned my advocacy towards that, because it's just something that we can't help but we don't know.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So education is all about it, and fixing those type of biases in nursing.
I agree. What about diversity? What is the benefit of diversity in nursing?
Oh my goodness. I love it. Seeing nurses from all walks of life. I will say that has been the coolest part of COVID. I did not think I'd ever utter that sentence in my entire life, but has been that my hospital has had to employ much more travelers, and I have met more nurses from different areas, more walks of life, backgrounds, and it has been incredible, especially as someone who fairly later in my nursing career is starting a brand new specialty, going from trauma to postpartum. Yeah, that was a big jump. I love it, but oh my gosh. And so getting to meet all these people from different walks of life in this specialty that is so old has been really, really, really cool. And so diversity in nursing has helped me in that manner improve my nursing care. And I get told constantly by the travelers who have never worked with a nurse in a wheelchair, or when I came on with my new preceptors in my new floor, when I came in a chair, I will never forget my very first preceptor at the end of the first day said, you know what? I really wasn't sure about precepting a nurse in a chair. I thought I was going to have to do a lot of work for you. I didn't know, how much you would need support. And it took about 15 minutes for me to realize that you are still a nurse. You just have wheels attached to your butt. I'm like, Yes, thank you. I am so glad that I got to provide that education. And so now if any of my coworkers have questions about, wheelchair use or wheelchair life or anything like that, they come to me. And so just having me on the floor has helped us, be more cognizant and careful for our patients with mobility limiting disabilities. And I think that's the benefit of diversity in nursing, is just that education piece. We take care of all kinds, and so it's always good to work with all kinds as well.
That's right. So, what does cultural competence mean for healthcare providers?
Ooh, that is a good one. So I work in a level 1 trauma center where we get people from all over, every walk of life, every kind of background you could possibly imagine. And working in postpartum specifically, my day-to-day life on the unit is working with all kinds of cultures in this field that's so incredibly old, and there's so much cultural tradition linked into it for all kinds. Things that I didn't realize to look out for. For example, a lot of Hispanic families really, really like to nestle the babies in lots and lots and lots and lots of blankets, because not generally used to having any sort of air conditioning system, and that's just culturally what they tend to do. And so if we aren't culturally competent, especially in healthcare, there's a way to properly care for our patients while still respecting cultural norms and traditions. And so if we are educated on these ways, we can absolutely be better healthcare practitioners, because our patients will trust us further and not feel accidentally slighted because we made some sort of cultural mistake that we didn't know working with a culture that wasn't our own. So I think it's incredibly important.
Yeah, you brought up education a few points, and I couldn't agree with you more. Education is key. I could just talk and talk about it. So I agree with you. Education can make a big impact for sure.
Absolutely. We can't help what we don't know.
That's exactly right, Ryan. Ryan, how do you think nurses and healthcare professionals can improve on this as a whole?
Education. I mean, that's really the only way. And education, from practitioners of specific cultures, people raised in certain cultures, not just an overview from a book written from one perspective. And I think that's where communities like NurseTech are incredibly important as well, because you do have that ability to reach out and speak with nurses from all walks of life and all cultures and learn from them, specifically from people who experience it, live it every day. And I just think that's really important, is to get that education. Because like I've said before, can't help what we can't know.
That's exactly right. So what other changes do you want to see in the healthcare industry?
Definitely accessibility. Physically in the infrastructure for sure. I never realized how inaccessible our hospitals are, especially to employees, until I became a wheelchair user. It's just blew my mind. I really did not ever think that I'd have to worry about it too much. Hospitals are made for our patients. Well, they are, but oftentimes by someone who doesn't experience disability. And so just little things like bathroom doors that took me 2 hands to open, little old ladies can't grab that and rip those doors open. So little things like that, to realizing that most hospitals don't have handicap accessible employee parking, because that's just generally not thought of as a thing, that we'd have somebody with a disability working in healthcare. But we do. It's just that these people are flying under the radar for so long, because it has been a stigma in healthcare, especially in nursing, that physical disability ain't gonna fly. It's just a very physical job, and that's something that's not gonna happen. And so I had no idea how inaccessible things were until I was in those wheels, so to speak. So as far as the physical part, yes, but also getting more disabled human beings working in healthcare. There is such, like I said, this stigma. And so many people with physical disabilities don't even try and don't even want to tackle that. Trying to get into nursing school with a physical disability or using a mobility aid is so incredibly difficult. I am a member of a national organization, the National Organization of Nurses with Disabilities. And I think that we spend 98% of our time answering emails from nursing students who are being told no from nursing schools across the country because of a physical disability. Because how many times you read a job description or a description on classes for nursing and, must be able to lift so much weight, must be able to walk so far, which is absolutely true. But we can't think about how these people are existing day in and day out just with a slight help of a mobility aid, and how they would absolutely still be able to be fantastic nurses, and how many different types of nursing there are in the world working with this organization. Yeah.
I was about to comment on that. Think about stuff you can do that doesn't require being out on the floor, like MDS, the modified data specialist. Think about that, or like the insurance roles you can do as a nurse.
When I was transitioning to my wheelchair, I worked as an acute care case manager for 2 years, where I'm still in the hospital setting, but I wasn't working patient care hands-on and could use my wheelchair easily. And so there's so many people who are just kind of being slighted by healthcare as a career. And these are people with this lived experience that's so beneficial to healthcare and developing and moving forward with the way that we care for patients. So that's a big thing that I advocate for, is trying to get more disabled humans involved in healthcare and into healthcare careers, if that's what they want to pursue.
Yeah, I'm still thinking about just having more accessibility. We have it for our patients. We need to have it for staff too. I mean, there's so much you can do like you said, as a nurse, that you don't have to always be on the floor and walking around and stuff. There's other things to do as well.
Absolutely.
So, do you think that NurseTech could put resources out there that could help others know about ways to help with that issue?
Definitely. Putting out stories from disabled healthcare providers. Those of us who have kind of lived both lives and worked as, ambulatory nurses as well as disabled nurses have this cool kind of, I've seen it, but from both sides. And I know, where our strengths are and where our weaknesses are. And so getting these people together and sharing their stories, educational moments, it's so beneficial. Because, how often do people run across nurses with disabilities in their careers? I know that I hadn't until myself. So, social media, I've met tons now that are out there and that are educating and advocating. And it's just, I think that NurseTech can be incredibly beneficial at helping, kind of lower this divide.
I agree. And look at you. You've got, 12,000 and some followers. I mean, think about the impact and difference you have made. People have been reaching out to you, and no telling how many people you have met and helped just by sharing your story.
Thank you.
Yes. Can you tell us, Ryann, what's something you are passionate about that we haven't yet discussed?
I think we've hit all the high points. My only other one that I advocate for as well, and I say advocate because I'm Miss Wheelchair Virginia. So, yeah, I have a crown and everything, and I've had this title for the past 2 years, and I travel around educating. My platform has been educating healthcare professionals on disability and getting more disabled humans involved in healthcare. And so, I'm so incredibly passionate about that, and I have loved getting to wear that title and competed for Miss Wheelchair America this past August. I didn't win, but I was given a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Miss Wheelchair Foundation for my disability advocacy. So that's been incredibly, it's been awesome to see all my hard work and kind of pay off. So yeah, that's my other venue.
That's awesome. Gosh, you have so much going on.
Yeah.
How do you find a balance with everything you do?
Yes. So I will, you're not kidding. So I work night shift full time as a postpartum nurse, and usually I get off in the morning, come home and make content, which is exactly what I did today. I worked all night and then came home, changed clothes, recorded an educational video for my page, napped, and now I'm back at it again. And definitely, I love what I do. I thought that my disability, it took my dreams of, being a dancer and being on Broadway the first time, took my dreams of being a flight nurse and the ER nurse the second time. And I thought that, you know, at the time I was told I was going to be in a wheelchair, that it was going to take nursing from me as a whole. And it didn't. And it has actually showed me, you know, I'm able to help more people in my disability advocacy work, and it has made me a better nurse than I ever thought I could be. And so I've gotten to help more people than I could possibly imagine. And so, because I love what I do, I can do it on very little sleep and lots of coffee, but also passion.
I get it. Wow, Ryann, what a story. And you were told that your disability would take you away from nursing. No, it hasn't. Yeah. No, it hasn't. Look at the difference you were making.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for your time today here on Nurse Tech. We really appreciate your time and sharing your story with us. And thank you for the difference you have made in this world. I'm sure others have reached out to you as well and your support, and you've inspired them to keep moving forward and don't let that disability prevent them from reaching their dreams. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.